Well, good morning, everyone. My name's Eric Chappell, Community Evangelist for InfraWorks 360. I want to welcome everyone to today's webcast, Scripting in InfraWorks 360. Very pleased that we have Wes Newman with us today, Customer Success Engineer from Autodesk. And just from the time I've spent working with Wes, he truly is a genius, not only in InfraWorks, but in many other things. So we're lucky to have him with us today. Before we get into that, I wanted just to talk to you a little bit about our webcast series and our community. If this is your first time here, we've been doing this twice a month since about April. And we try to shoot for the first and third Wednesdays of the month. And so far, we've been able to hold to that. And it's really just an opportunity to get you, the users, and those interested in InfraWorks 360 informed about what's going on with the product from the perspective of the product team, not sales, not marketing, but the folks who are actually writing the code and developing the technology that you're working with. And that's a special perspective that I think you all appreciate. It also gives you a chance to ask questions and provide feedback while you're hearing from these folks, and just generally bringing you guys, the users, closer to the folks who make the software. I want to make everyone aware that our next webcast is coming up on September 2nd, and it's What's New in InfraWorks 360. And yes, there is yet another new set of features being released around that time frame, and we're going to tell you what's coming and what to expect with those new features being released around the September 2nd time frame. So don't miss that, so you can get the scoop almost right on the day they come out, as far as what's coming down the pike with the latest features. Some other webcast topics that we're thinking about having, just to give you an idea what we think about. So if at any time you have any suggestions for topics, you have a questions pane in your GoToWebinar interface, feel free to just say, hey, would love it if you guys did a webcast on this topic, and we'll certainly add it to the list. So I mentioned the InfraWorks 360 community, something very excited about all the time, because we've got some amazing users out there who've adopted the product and who are doing amazing things with it every day. And you can talk to these folks on all of the different items in the bullet list that you see here. If you go to autodesk.com/InfraWorks360 community, there you'll find the forum, the idea station, where you can let our product team know any ideas you have for changing or improving the software. InfraTips is where we have this quick, just a couple of steps, or a 30-second blurb about a tip that'll make you more productive in InfraWorks 360. The gallery, where you can see what other users are up to. The social hub, where you can see what folks are talking about as far as InfraWorks 360 is concerned on social media and blogs. And we've also got our latest videos, including any recordings from previous webcasts, all packed into that community page. Yeah. So Wes, you should now be a presenter.
All right, great. So just a quick disclaimer. I know that Eric covers this in all of his. We want to make sure that everybody knows that some things we may show maybe in a preview, and that's just what they are. They may or may not come out in the product. They may come out in the box. They may come out in future releases. And so this is just kind of a disclaimer to let you know that some of the stuff you see may or may not be moving forward. Also, I'll get a little bit more. What are we going to show you today? Some of it is unsupported currently, meaning that you can't call in and get ADM support or technical support from Autodesk, the JavaScript API. So that was just one of the disclaimers we wanted to cover real quick. And yeah, so if you have questions, please enter in the Q&A panel. I'll be monitoring them some, and Eric as well will try to respond to those as quickly as possible. If we need to, I can break out and answer some of those either throughout the present or at the end. I won't be opening the phone lines just due to the amount of traffic that we have online. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to exit out of this PowerPoint and jump into another one just really quick. Okay, so here's my quick agenda, and I'm not going to be showing a lot of PowerPoint. I think I have like 6 or 7 slides just to kind of keep us on task today. I'm going to give you a broad overview of the InfraWorks 360 JavaScript API. I'll also be talking about some of the other scripting and APIs just to put some clarity on this issue. And then we're also be running some scripts and talking about the debugger, as well as reviewing sample code and showing you how to utilize some of these other scripts I'm going to be providing. As well as at the end, we're going to just quickly write a small utility, show you how fast we can leverage the API, and just within a few lines of code, we're able to get out some information. So that's just the quick agenda. We have had some questions asked about whether this video is going to be recorded. The answer to that is yes. It's currently being recorded, and it will be posted on the. And then the data sets and the documentation will also be posted, and they'll be posted in the forum as a forum post, and there'll either be an attachment to one of the threads there, or there'll be some direct links where you can download them. And so what's going to be included in that is just some sample code, and then as well as the API documentation, which I'm going to cover right now. So the JavaScript API, it is not yet officially supported. And again, I mentioned this a minute ago. What we mean by that is it's not currently on, it's not currently supported through ADN or Autodesk Development Network, and it's being, but that doesn't mean it can't be utilized, and it can't be utilized in a meaningful manner. It just means currently it's not being supported through the ADN network, and that there could be changes moving forward architecturally that would hinder some of the scripts that you'd written in previous versions, or scripts that they've changed something where I've had to change to fix the error that may cause due to an API change. But most of them are all still there, and they're continuing to add additional calls, but it's still not an officially supported API. There is another API called REST API that this webcast is not focusing on, but that allows you to access your InfraWorks 360 model in the cloud, query information from the cloud, and get it back through a RESTful interface. And I'm actually going to be talking about REST in a little bit, because one of my actually utilizes some REST calls to get data from another source. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're not talking about the REST API. We're talking about the JavaScript desktop API. There's, again, other types of there's other types of scripting as well, and I'm going to touch on this. On the import configuration, if you've utilized InfraWorks very much at all, you've probably noticed there's a scripting tab. So when you go to, say, for instance, import some buildings or some roads, you notice all the way on the right, there's a script tab. That's also a form of scripting, and it does utilize JavaScript. And then also tooltips, and I kind of threw this in there because I cover this kind of lightly throughout this. It uses HTML scripting, and it can also leverage some JavaScript and other things like that. But a lot of people kind of lump this in with the scripting as well. So that's a couple types of the scripting. I'm going to cover those in the product in just one second. And then the documentation. So a lot of people, this is the first thing they ask for when they know that there is an API. And so what I want to real quickly show you is what that documentation does look like. So here is the Autodesk InfraWorks 360 JavaScript documentation. It is it is an automated documentation created at compile time. So it's really just shows you a list of the classes and all of their functions and variables or properties that they may contain. Some of them have more descriptions than others, and I'm going to be walking through this documentation in a minute. So this documentation is going to be provided in one of those links or in directly attached to the forum post. And when you are able to download the documentation itself, you're going to get an HTML folder, and then within that is a bunch of other HTML files and, of course, pings and other images to make this HTML file look the way it's supposed to. But in the root of this HTML directory is going to be an index.html file. That's the one that you want to open up, and then you can navigate from there. So if we go down there and find this index and then open it up, it should open up this exact same file for us. And this is the documentation. Again, we will be kind of moving back and forth between this and some of the scripts and InfraWorks today, but I just want to make you aware of where it's at and where to get it. Okay. So what are some of the, now that we're talking about the scripting, what are some of the possibilities? And again, this is some of the other first questions I get asked a lot. What can you actually do with the API? And I think the biggest ones that you can, that want to leverage are modification of existing InfraWorks objects or importing and exporting. So you can do all of those things. You can import, you can export, you can delete, you can modify InfraWorks objects. And what do I mean by InfraWorks objects? Things like buildings, roads, coverage areas, anything like that that you've been imported. That's what I'm considering an InfraWorks object, a 3D model, whether it be in city furniture or whatever may have you. So you can access all of those data types, manipulate them, delete them. You can also utilize selection sets and custom queries. And what this helps you do is further refine some of your editing capabilities. So if you only want to operate on a particular building or a particular group of buildings, the user can select those buildings, and then through the API you can simply just operate on those that have been selected. And if you want to, again, further refine what you've selected, you can utilize queries. And those are the same queries that you can create in InfraWorks, and I'll get into this in a minute. So since if I wanted to pick particular buildings with a height or a particular facade, you could do something like that and help to filter down your selection set so you can only operate on those. You can also do things like create reports, and also I'm not going to cover this in great detail today because the length of time, but you can also leverage Qt Creator for creating UI files. And so most people think that the JavaScript API is only console type applications, but you can create small user interfaces and leverage those as well. And I'll get into that. So let's talk about some of this, some of the actual scripting and tooltips themselves. And so what I want to show you first is just where you can access the scripting tooltips and debugger. So I'm going to move over to InfraWorks now, and I'm not going to provide the data set, the actual model, because I'm just in a working model mostly today. So most of the stuff you can use these scripts on your own models. And again, another disclaimer here. You may or may not see InfraWorks crash today, depending on what I do in the script. You can make it crash. You can corrupt your database. You can do a lot of nasty things to your model, and so you need to use some caution when you are utilizing scripts and developing them. I would highly recommend that you, when you're developing scripts, either A, copy your model, or B, be in a working model that you don't mind being corrupted or backing up and restoring. I do that quite regularly, and many times when I'm developing a script, I'll create a very small model that only has a little bit of data in it so that I can quickly restore those models if I need to, or download them again if I do in fact corrupt them or crash them for some reason. So that's one thing that you can get into trouble really fast, but once the scripts are written and solid, typically you don't have any problems with them. It's usually just in developing them if you have syntax errors or you didn't properly close something out, that's when you can run into trouble. So let me just we'll just get our feet wet with a little bit of scripting. So the first thing I want to cover that I mentioned is actually scripting through the configuration tab. And so I've already imported a shapefile that is polygons, and I'm utilizing, these are really just building footprints. And what I'm going to show you is how to leverage this script tab to randomize some of the buildings. And you can already see that the script is being built. So as you actually change the menu or this dialog, this script, if you notice over here, will automatically be updated. So if I pick something here for name and I go back over here to script and edit it, you'll notice down here that this name now is using this source comment. Okay, so you can, it builds a script on the fly, and then you can go and edit this. But when you hit the edit button, you will also notice that the rest of the blog's dithered out because you are effectively controlling all that information through the script now. So if you want to go back to utilizing the dialog, you simply click revert, and then you can have the dialog back. And again, this is just a simple little text editor in here, and it is utilizing JavaScript. And again, if for those of you not familiar with JavaScript, it is a C-like language. So if you utilize any C language, C, C++, C#, Java, any of the JavaScript will look really familiar to you. The syntax is very similar and easy to pick up if you haven't used it. And it's one of the easier ones to look up because it doesn't come with, or easier ones to get started with because it doesn't come with a lot of overhead, and it's easy to create variables and other things like that on the fly that are a little more constrained with other C languages. So it's nice to have a language like that that you can quickly write code and get something out with. And so we're utilizing that here and through the API. So what we want to do here is I'm going to show you full different ways to manipulate buildings through today. And so one of the things I want to show you was, and this is simply a text file that I've opened up, and this so happens to be Notepad++, and I'll hit on that again throughout the presentation. It's one of my favorite editors. It's freely available. It's easy to use. It's lightweight. There's a bunch of add-ons for it. And so what I've done here is just opened up a text file, and I'm simply just going to copy everything out of this text file, go back to InfraWorks, to my scripting tab, copy everything in here, or select everything in here and paste over it. And that's it for this one. I'm simply going to hit close and refresh. And what it's going to do, and we'll go back through this in a minute, but it allows us to randomize things. And so what we did here is we first, as soon as this open back up, we'll walk through this. So what we did here is we quickly randomized the height of the building because this information didn't have it in there. And then based on the height of the building, we're making some other decisions. We're applying some random facades. If the building is under so many feet, it gets specific roof materials that it can pick from, and then also it can pick from different facade styles. And then when the roof height is above a certain, when it's above, looks like 40 feet, then it has a flat roof or flatter roof, and we pick a completely other different set of styles for the facade and for the roof material. And so this this configuration JavaScript is nice to have because it shows you how to do some switching and some randomizations in here, and allows you kind of get your feet wet with the different ways to actually manipulate objects inside of InfraWorks. And so I wanted to cover this before we really get into the JavaScript because they kind of go hand in hand. And you can do everything that you can do in this configuration dialog through here. You can also do through the scripting interface, although it does take a little more work because essentially what's happening in this data source configuration tab, everything in this script tab gets applied to every single building as it imports it. Okay, so there's already basically a loop created for you, and then every time it encounters a new building, all of this information gets applied to it. Whereas in the JavaScript API, we would have to get all of the buildings, build the loops, loop through the buildings, and then apply all of this information. And I have a script that does exactly the same thing, which we can compare and contrast if you want, and show you how to leverage the same type of JavaScript in both the configuration and the API. So this is one way to leverage the JavaScript, and again, I've simply just imported this, and you can see I've now randomized a bunch of buildings and the facades and the heights. Again, we could change any type of information that's on those buildings, those properties, if we want to. But this is just a simple test to show you that. The other thing that I wanted to cover is tooltips. And again, tooltips can vary. They can be super simple to something very complex. If I select one of these buildings and I simply go to the properties on it, you'll notice there's a tooltip property, and I can edit the tooltip in here. And there's a couple different ways to edit the tooltip. I can simply type in whatever I want this tooltip to say. I can also pull things from different tabs, and I can edit in HTML. Okay, so let's just quickly do a link to a tag here. So this is a property, and so for instance, I'm going to put the name, I'm going to apply it in the tooltip, and it's not going to show anything at first because there's no name here. You can hit preview, and it'll show you a preview of what it's going to look like. We're going to click OK here and update this building. And then when we hover over it, it's just simply going to say name right now. But if we go back and edit the actual name field, and we'll do something like name test, and we'll update and hover over this, and then you can see now this this tooltip is utilizing the name, and this is these tooltips like this are utilizing the link, so this isn't hard-coded, so you can apply, this would be like a generic type tooltip. You can apply to multiple buildings, and depending on the different properties, it could key off of that. And so that's the most simplistic type of probably tooltip that you could create. I'm also going to show you some more advanced ones in just one second here. So that's a brief overview of the scripting and the import configuration. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that, and then also tooltips. So really the meat of the presentation that I wanted to go over now is running the scripts and also the debugger itself. And so to actually access where you're going to load the scripts in InfraWorks and run the debugger, you're going to, there's a couple different ways to get to it. I typically go through the settings and utilities button, and then it's directly to the, then there's a direct button to the scripts in there. When you open it, there is a text editor there, so you can either load a JavaScript file directly, or you can simply type in the interface. It does have a console, and what I mean by that is it's a place where it's going to output the errors and or any type of print statements you may have will also output to that console. And there's also a pretty good little debugger there that allows you to step through your code, investigate some objects, look at the variables, see what's stored in them, and then it also helps you, I utilize a lot to help me become familiar with the other types of objects that may be in the API that I don't quite understand, so you can help do that, help further investigate some of the methods that may be on some of these objects that that the documentation isn't quite clear on. You can see them in actual usage, and it helps to answer some of those, and at least I found that in the past. Okay, let me get back a little bit of my real estate here. And again, to open up the scripts, I'm going to go to the Settings and Utilities button, and then go to the Scripts button over here on the left, and that's going to open up the console and the text editor. So this top window is simply a text editor there. You can see it's already starting with line numbers. And then the bottom part is the console. And this will, again, print out any information that you sent to the print or any errors. You can also toggle on the debugger. So if we toggle this on and when we hit Start Script, it will then, the debugger will then pop up and we can step through our script. If you also notice, there's a couple of different other buttons here. So we have a load. This is where we can load scripts that we've previously written, and there's a drop down here that will keep a tally of the 5 last run scripts, so you can just simply click those and it will load those up for you. And there's also a reset context button here, and that button is allowed to reset the debugger and any other type of information that was being that was being utilized in memory. It helps to just flush out the script and the debugger. So anytime you're switching scripts or reloading a script, I highly recommend that you click this reset context before you run the next script or before you make any major modifications to your script. Go ahead and just hit this reset context, get into the habit of doing that, and then start the script over. All right, so I've done a lot of talking now. So let's actually start a quick script and show you what that's going to look like. And to do that, I'm going to first I'm going to select 3 buildings here, and I'm just simply selecting the buildings and holding the control button down. And then I'm going to load a new script that I've already. And I'm going to load this building randomize script. And I'm really not concerned with the actual script itself. Here, I'm going to click Start Script. And you'll notice what happened there. These three buildings got re-randomized. And so this is the exact same script, more or less, that I was using in the import configuration, except for I had to create my own loop and then loop through the selection set that had been done, and then I apply all those random functions. So I'm just kind of comparing and contrasting two different ways to randomize some buildings using the same type of JavaScript there. And again, all these will be available to you. So real quick, let me hop back to our PowerPoint and let's run some sample code. So I just showed you one of the samples that I'm providing, and that's how to randomize some buildings. I also want to show you how to do some simple counts. So if we want to look at city furniture, for instance, group them by style and then count the counts of those particular styles. I'm going to show you a script to do that. I've already showed you the randomized building ones. This HTML report, this is a pretty neat one. That's going to show some more capabilities of the API. The next one I'm going to show is how to update buildings from an outside source. And so what I'm doing here is simply referencing a text file or a CSV file. I'm doing a lookup, finding some matching information from some buildings that are already exist, and then I'm updating those buildings with that information from the CSV file. I've got a couple scripts to show you how to search some external databases, external sources. Some of these use the REST API. Some of them just simple URL connects. Got a couple other simple ones to set the current date and time, and also a neat one to show you how to what I call extrude coverages. It's not directly that, but it kind of simulates, allows you to copy some geometry. So let's hop into some of these, and then what I want to do after that is start investigating some of this code so I can show you how to actually write some of these scripts. And again, you don't have to be a developer or a scripting genius to leverage these. You can simply utilize the scripts that have already been written, or like me, I do a lot of copy paste or simple hacking back and forth in between my scripts. I'll grab a chunk from one script, paste it into another until I have the proper written that I need. So after you get familiar with the script, with the API and the interface behind it, you'll be able to quickly just grab snippets of code that you need and paste them into a new script and quickly get what you're intending for. Okay, so let's go back to this model, and I want to just minimize the scripting interface. I don't have any city furniture in this model, I don't believe, so I'm going to just quickly draw some. Then I'm going to go to my city furniture, and really it doesn't matter. I'll draw a couple different types here. Okay, so there we've got, zoom in here, you can see 20 or so different 3D objects and with 3 different styles. So I'm going to go ahead and load up our next script, and this one is going to be count city furniture types. And you'll notice most of these scripts are relatively small. This one is pretty tiny, 1 kilobyte in size. Not a whole lot there. If I did expand this and show you, you'll see this one is about 21 lines of code here to do this. So I load the script and I simply click Start, and that's it. And you can see here, this one took less than a second to evaluate. So I did have some other city furniture in here. You'll notice what it does is it loops through all of the city furniture. It groups them by style, and it prints out the style name and then the number of counts of each of those objects as well. So that's a quick way to create a report that simply dumps to the console. There are other file I/O operations you can do. If you had any experience with JavaScript whatsoever, you'll know that it's typically utilized in a web page, and there aren't to keep web pages safe and secure. JavaScript does not come with hardly any file I/O operations whatsoever, because web pages should not be able to access the local machine or the hard drive through a script. But there are additional file routines that have been written and added to the API that you can access, and so I'll go over this as well. So that's one way to just do some simple counts. The next one, let's just take a look at. The next one is I'm going to show you is another report. This is a little more advanced type of report, and I'm going to select. In fact, I'm going to select just a little bit more. Instead of using Control for selecting, I'm going to use a window select and simply select some things and roads here, and make sure I have this loaded. Okay, and then I'm going to simply start, which is, again, the user selection set. You can choose to just work on the whole database, or you can choose to work on what's previously been selected. So again, this helps to further refine what objects you're manipulating or reporting on. So I'm going to hit Start Script here, and you can see what it's done. It was pretty quick. I'll go back to InfraWorks. You can look at the output. You'll notice that happened again around a tenth of a second there, and we've got some information that we wrote out. It says no barriers selected. This actually reports on buildings, barriers, and roads, and it also tells you where the file was written. And so what I did was I looped through all of the buildings, barriers, and roads, collected some information, and then wrote them to an HTML file and opened that HTML file. And so that's a lot of things happening at once that I want to cover. You're able to do file I/O operations, so you can create a file, save it, and two, you can start an external program from InfraWorks. So what I've done here is started my browser and passed it the file to load. So that's what we're looking at right here in my browser. I've simply created a real simple HTML file and give it a header, and you notice here are all the buildings first, and I pulled 4 properties from that building: name, description, user data, and also the from those. All of these buildings, none of them had any of those other first 3. We're just grabbing the square foot, but here's one that I'd created in there. But if you scroll onto roads, you'll notice some of these roads actually have names on them. So from Model Builder, as a lot of you are probably familiar already, we do have names coming from some of them. So you can see we can start to leverage some of those additional properties through here. And again, this is just a little bit of sample code to show you that you actually can create reports from InfraWorks. Know that we get asked that quite a bit, so I've leveraged this to just create a quick little sample for you to show you how to do several things there. again, write out a file and open up an external application. Okay, so the next one I want to show you is, again, some more possibilities here. The first one, what I want to show you is we're going to use the building name as a key. And so what I want to show you is I'm just going to pick, this will work, this building. I'll go to Properties, and I'm going to give it a name. And this is the name I need to give it. This is the file we're utilizing to key off of, and if you'll notice here, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of information in it. Off of the column for me, utilizing the second column, the height, to change the height of this actual building here. So I'm going to call this building I shape, and up that. And then I'm going to load this script. And now I'm simply going to run it. So if you notice the difference there, but it simply changed the height of that building. So it scanned the whole database. It found the matching building, and then changed the height of that building to what's in this file. So if we change this to, let's say, 200 instead, and I'm going to save this, just Control-S there, Alt-Tab back, and we're just going to start it. And there you can see it could be around 200 feet tall. So if we select this, look at the properties on it, you'll notice the roof height indeed does say 200 feet there. And if we change this to something like H shape, it should then hit on the other one that's in there. And if we start the script over, there you go. This one is now back to 20 feet because our H shape is set to 20 feet. So there, again, I'm showing you how to do a file I/O operation. So when you get this sample, you'll know how to import a file. You'll know how, then I parse the file and find then loop through the matching buildings and update the buildings themselves. So I'll show you just a couple more. Okay, these are pretty quick. I want to show you how to search some external data sources, and then do the time and date, and then extrude the coverages. Then after that, I want to show you quickly a little about the API and how to write some code and to get started. And to do this, yeah, this one's the one I want to show. I may switch to another model in just 1 second. That's the wrong script there. Pardon me. This is the one I want. So what this one does, it utilizes the Google Places API, and just one word of caution here: the Google Places API does require a developer key, and so when I give you this sample, it's going to be without my developer key because you're limited to so many requests per day. but you can't. It's a freely available thing. You have to go get the developer key and turn on the Google Places and the Google Maps development API that you need, and you'll have access to that. So then you'll just simply paste a key into this first. Open this up and I'll show it to you. It's going to be the first line right here where it says key. You'll paste your key in there. Let's just before that, let's just take a quick look at what this actually does. And so you'll notice this actually has a UI. So this one, I'm utilizing the Qt creator, and I created a real simple UI. It has a text box, a search button, and then a window to display the results. And so what this does is allows you to search the Google Places API. So anything that you typically, if you open up Google Maps and you search for something in Google Maps, it's using Google Places, and it returns the same information that you would typically see from Google Maps, but it's in a text-based format. And so what we'll do, for instance, if we want to simply search for something like school, I'll hit return there, and it's going to give you a whole listing of everything that comes back from Google Places of schools, or that has a keyword of school in the general vicinity of your model. And one thing to keep in mind, the Google Places API, I have to give it a center point and a search radius. And so that means it's going to be circular extent, so there actually could be points or things that could return that either, depending on how you create the extents or radius, could fall off the model slightly. So just be aware of that. But the next thing you do is after you've got your results back, you can click on one of these. So I'm just going to click on this middle school here. And it places a point for you. And I'm creating a POI, or a point of interest. You can create other types of objects. And then I am creating a tooltip with the extracted information that was returned from Google Places. So if I hover over this, you'll notice we get a kind of a tooltip here that's a little bit bigger than the last one we saw, or that traditionally you're going to see. And it's come back with a little bit of information there. It's got the name of the school, the type, and it also has the vicinity, which is a lot of times the address, as well as a picture, top-down picture that returned from Google of this location. I've also created a hyperlink in this tooltip. You can click on this hyperlink, and it will actually load Google Places or Google Maps in through the tooltip, so I can navigate Google Places if I want to. I can do Street View. So if I wanted to look around here, I can do that. And again, this is all within a tooltip. If I simply remove my mouse and then hover over it again, it comes back to the standardized tooltip, and we can click on the hyperlink again if we want. But that just shows you, again, some more flexibility there. This is one of the more complicated scripts that I've written, because it does create external calls. I have to call the Google Places. I have to return it. I have to get a return from it. I have to manipulate the contents that have been returned, and then create InfraWorks objects when they clicks on one of these points here. So that's one of the more advanced ones. Real quickly, I'll show you a couple more, and then we'll get into a little bit of the scripting here. So the other one I want to show you was to set the time and date. And this is, if we look here, this is simply 4 lines of code here. There's not a whole lot here. I get I get a new date, which gives me the current time, and then I set that date and time to the sunset. And so I'm just going to quickly hit Start Script there. You can see it was hard to see, but it automatically changed my sun and my date and everything to what it's currently like right now, which is almost noon. All right, and one more. So for this one, we actually need to create a couple of coverage areas. I'm just going to just draw 2 coverage areas so that we can see what's going on here. And then what it does is it simply utilizes the selected coverage areas. It creates buildings from them, and then I randomly assign a building color and a building height, just to show you. So I'll just click Start Script, and that's really that's all there is to it. You'll notice there's 2 different colors here. So if I delete these, I select these again and run the script, these should be different colors and different heights. And so what I'm doing is actually, one more time there so you can see a little bit of change. What I'm doing is I'm copying the geometry from the coverage areas and creating a building from that geometry and assigning the height and colors based on that. And so that was really the end of the sample code that I wanted to show you. I really just wanted to give you, make you familiar with some of the possibilities there, because a lot of people don't know exactly what can be done there. I hope that these samples can show you some of those things, and then help through creating some of the scripts on your own. So let's create, with the time we have left, and we only have a few minutes, let's create a small utility. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through it. So I've already mentioned a couple of JavaScript editors. There are many freely available. I use Notepad++, and I use a plugin called JS Tool that helps to do some cleanup of kind of like pretty print. If you've heard of that on XML or HTML, it's very similar. Helps to clean up all your JavaScript and keep it looking nice. A couple things to keep in mind as we walk through this, and again, these are just talking points for me. When you see app in some of the samples, it is referring to application in the documentation, which is effectively the InfraWorks, what is effectively InfraWorks. So when you get, and this will make more sense in a minute, when you get the app object, you actually have InfraWorks. And then kind of going down from there, if you notice, we are going to use the dot to access the members. So the app.ActiveModelDB, that is the database of the loaded model. So app gets you InfraWorks, ActiveModelDB gets you the database, and then all of the objects are stored down inside tables in the database. So each object class has its own table. So buildings, roads, coverage areas, they're all in their own table, and then each object is stored in a row inside of that. And you can utilize the table ID or a name to access the actual tables. A couple other things to keep in mind. Try to keep your code stored in functions. And some of the samples, some of my older samples, you'll see I use some globals and I do some calling out just in the file itself, and don't contain things in a function call. But I try to keep everything in a function call And a lot of times the first line of code that you're going to hit is simply a starter function. But it does keep everything cleaner, makes it more portable, and easier to copy and paste, snippets, and for return values as well, because technically you can't, if you call a function from the main space, you can't get a return and utilize it. So it's nice to at least wrap that in a function if you need to. Also, when you start a query, you should always end a query. So those should be in pairs, very much like brackets or parentheses or anything like that. So if you're having problems with storing data, it doesn't seem like it's storing it or finishing it, or something is not letting go after the script has finished and you can't edit that table for some reason, so I can't add more buildings to delete them, maybe you didn't end the query properly and it's hanging. So that's something to keep in mind. And then you also manipulate the objects by editing the right row, not the read. I see this a lot. And again, these are just major gotchas that I see. File paths utilize forward slashes instead of backslashes. And inside of the documentation, you're going to use file for all the file I/O operations. So you can go in there in documentation and look at what's available and my samples. And this next line, this is basically the flow of the objects. So to get down to a single object, this is how you have to get there. You have to go through the application, to the current database, to the table, and then to the row. And each row is an actual object. Okay, so FDO table is a group of InfraWorks objects. So for instance, buildings, and then FDO row is an actual single object. And then to get to the properties on all of those objects, so say for instance the name, or in this case the roof height, you're going to access it just through the dot access. So it's going to be read dot, or whatever you call the read accessor or the write dot, and then the actual property name, and that'll get you to that property to be able to edit. Okay, so let's go ahead and I know we're right on the edge there. So I think we're running out of time. What I wanted to show you was just real quickly how to get the areas and sum them from coverage areas. And so I already have it written, so I don't think we have quite enough time for that. So I'm going to show you and then just run through the code real quick. And so you can see here I have a main function and then two function calls. And so what's going to happen is when we come into this JavaScript, and I'm in Notepad++ here, the first line that it's actually going to hit is this get areas function. Okay, so it's going to call this function and then run everything in this function, and then after that it's going to call the garbage collection on JavaScript. And so I typically like to put the GC at the very last line so InfraWorks can clean up all of its memory. The first thing I do is get the database. You'll notice here, so I'm using AP, that's InfraWorks, and then I have active model database. Then the next thing I do is get the table that I want, and again I'm calling it by name, so I'm getting the coverages. The next thing I do is get the active selection set, which is what the current selection is. So whatever the user has selected when the script is started, that's what I have here. I quickly do a sanity check, make sure that I have something selected. If I don't, then I just return out and print nothing selected. If I do have something selected, I further filter the selection and get only the coverage areas out, because the user may have selected buildings, may have selected roads, and everything else. So now I have a filter that is the coverages and it's only the selected coverages. The next thing I do is create a variable. This is simple, going to be double, and I started at 0. Then I loop through all of the selected coverages, and I simply add to the summation and then print the current area for that coverage, and then at the end I print the total area. Okay, so let's take a look at what that actually looks like in usage. There's 2 here underneath here, so I will grab these, load this, and do a start script, and there you can see it happens relatively fast. It gives me the 2 areas and then a summation of them all. Okay, so I know I'm a couple minutes over. I wanted to hand it back over to Eric and open it up for Q&A if we had any questions there. Eric, you still with us?
I'm still here. My sound coming through okay?
Sorry for running over there a few minutes. Yep, absolutely.
I just had 2 more slides I wanted to show.
Yep.
So I'm going to make myself presenter. And I don't know if you want to tackle 1 or 2 of those questions very quickly, Wes.
Yeah. Which questions? I don't mind tackling those.
So one was, can you pull, back when you were talking about the Google Places stuff, it says, can you pull the KML or KMZ from that location?
I'd have to look, but I don't think so. Using the Google Places API, Google has a bunch of different APIs that we may be able to extract additional information from, and I'd have to look into that a little bit more. But the Google Places one is simply just a text-based return, so it gives you a JSON or an XML, I think, are the 2 different options, but there may be more things that you can do there.
Okay. And one other question, can scripts be interrupted for user interactions like select an object or type in a value?
Right now, there are only if it's done through the UI. So you can't interrupt and prompt. There are no kind of selection or mouse handlers or event handlers currently in the API. So the answer to that is most likely no, unless you set it up through a UI for entering information in through there. You could possibly, I'd have to do it, you could possibly, while something's running, pop up a small UI and ask for something, and then continue running after that's been, I'd have to look though. But that would be my answer to that.
Okay.
So what, we have more?
I think that covers the major ones, but we are out of time. I just wanted to show this slide so that people can see how to get to the handouts, the sample and the documentation. I wanted to remind everyone of our upcoming webcast on September 2nd. And other than that, just wanted to say thanks for attending. Great job, Wes, and we'll see you out in the community. Thanks, everyone. See ya.